From IsReal News, this is the evening briefing for Thursday, March 12th. In the Detroit area, authorities are investigating an attack at Temple Israel in West Bloomfield Township, where an armed man drove a vehicle into the synagogue and was fatally shot after security personnel opened fire. According to an Associated Press source and Oakland County Sheriff Mike Bouchard, the attacker drove through a set of doors and into a hallway before the vehicle ignited. No staff members, teachers, or children at the synagogue's early childhood center were injured. One security officer was struck by the vehicle and knocked unconscious, but did not suffer life-threatening injuries. This comes amid heightened security at synagogues following the current war involving Israel, the United States, and Iran. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in his first press conference since the current phase of the war began, said Israel's objectives are to inflict major damage on Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs and to create conditions that could allow the Iranian public to challenge the regime. He said regime change itself would depend on Iranian citizens. Netanyahu also warned Hezbollah that it would pay what he described as a heavy price and said Israel would continue acting to remove threats from the north. This occurs as Israel continues to define both military and political goals for the conflict. Israeli media reports say U.S. officials believe President Donald Trump may soon face a decision on whether to deploy American ground forces inside Iran in connection with efforts to secure Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. Israeli officials quoted in the reporting declined to comment directly, but described the uranium stockpile as a central issue. The development follows warnings from the International Atomic Energy Agency that effective oversight of some Iranian material has been lost. In Israel, the military says a missile launched from Iran toward central Israel was intercepted this evening, while the Israeli Air Force began what officials described as a broad new wave of strikes in Tehran. Local authorities also announced that schools will remain closed next week. This comes as the war enters a prolonged phase, with Israeli officials signaling continued operations. A 17-year-old girl was killed in Rehovot after being struck by a vehicle while reportedly running for shelter during an Iranian missile alert. Paramedics say she was pronounced dead at the scene. Reports indicate that although she received an early warning on her phone, sirens ultimately did not sound in the city. The incident takes place as civilians across Israel continue to respond to fast-moving air raid alerts and shelter instructions. Israeli military officials are also reporting continued strikes beyond Iran itself. The IDF says it targeted Hezbollah command centers in Beirut and southern Lebanon, saying the sites were being used to advance attacks against Israel. This occurs as Israeli officials warn that the northern front remains active and potentially subject to further escalation. Regional security concerns are widening. Reuters reports that 6 French soldiers were wounded in an Iranian drone strike on a joint French and Kurdish Peshmerga base in northern Iraq. Separately, a Revolutionary Guard source told Reuters that if Iran's energy infrastructure is attacked, Tehran would respond by targeting oil and gas across the region. This comes as multiple countries assess the possibility of a broader regional conflict involving state and proxy actors. The U.S. military also announced that a refueling aircraft crashed in Iraq and that search and rescue efforts are ongoing. Officials did not immediately release details about casualties or the circumstances of the crash. This occurs as American forces continue operating extensively across the region. On the economic front, Brent crude closed above $100 a barrel for the first time since August 2022, while West Texas Intermediate also surged sharply. The move followed statements attributed to Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, indicating that the Strait of Hormuz should remain closed as leverage against adversaries. U.S. and international officials have also reported severe supply disruptions and additional vessel strikes in the Persian Gulf. This occurs as energy markets react to the risk of prolonged disruption in one of the world's most important oil transit routes. U.S. financial markets fell sharply as oil prices rose. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped more than 700 points and closed at a new low for 2026, while the S&P 500 and Nasdaq also posted losses. This comes as investors weigh the combined effects of rising energy prices, shipping disruptions, and the possibility of a longer war. In Europe, police in Norway say they no longer believe there is a threat to the synagogue in Trondheim after a suspicious vehicle incident earlier in the day. One suspect was arrested after a car chase, and police say they now believe they know the identity of a second suspect who remains at large. Security cordons around the synagogue were later reduced. The development follows a tense response near a Jewish communal site, but authorities now say the immediate threat level has decreased. In Israel's domestic arena, Supreme Court Deputy President Noam Solberg issued a rare public statement rejecting a right-wing campaign calling on him to support U.S. sanctions against the Supreme Court Chief Justice and the Attorney General. Solberg said internal disputes should be resolved within Israel and added that the court president is not an enemy. This occurs amid growing political strain around the judiciary during wartime. Those are the latest headlines from IsReal News.